Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode, we were joined by Ken Timsit, the head of Cronos Labs, the team tasked with growing out the Cronos blockchain ecosystem. In this episode, we spoke about crypto as a viable solution to modern banking, the relationships between centralized exchanges and their blockchain ecosystem counterparts, the Cronos blockchain ecosystem, lessons learned from building on the EVM and Cosmos tech stacks, the forthcoming Cronos triple yield bearing thesis for the zkCRO token, and so much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the host or guest may hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can head over to neonewstoday.com to check out a disclaimer. Also, if you like this episode, please don't hesitate to like, comment, review, or share with friends and family, as all of those actions really help get these episodes in front of more ears and eyes. So with all that said, I really enjoyed this conversation with Ken, and I hope you enjoy it too. Today we're joined by Ken Timsit, the head of Cronos Labs, the entity tasked with building and growing the non-custodial branch of the Cronos ecosystem. How you doing today, Ken?
I'm great, Dylan. Hi.
When we start these conversations with folks that I've never met before, I'm really curious to hear kind of what was your genesis with crypto. For me and many others, we first heard about Bitcoin, we first heard about Ethereum, and then it went over our heads and we come back a few years later. So I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective. When did you first hear about blockchain, about crypto, and kind of what was your path into the industry?
Yeah, so my path into blockchain was both professional and personal. On the professional level, I had worked for many years as a consultant in financial services. At that time, the big word was the digitization of bank processes, digitization of banking services. And so, as part of working on that, of course, I had looked at new technologies and how they impacted the creation and delivery of financial services. And so that's how I came across blockchain and found that technology very interesting. On a personal level, I'm originally from France. I've lived and worked in the US, in the UK, in Singapore, in Indonesia, Malaysia. Every time I had to start a new to open a new set of bank accounts, transfer money around the world, do the KYC, fill out hundreds of pages of checkboxes that were meaningless, but were supposed to protect me financially. And so I kind of had a first-hand experience of how the world of financial services is not designed for global citizens, digital citizens, like many of us are. And so when I met Joe Lubin and Consensys in 2017, I was kind of primed to work on the blockchain revolution and how this could transform the financial rails of our economy. And so that's how I got into the industry initially, because I had a background working with corporates and governments. Initially my work was basically to evangelize Ethereum to corporates and governments, explore use cases with them, and then over time, of course, besides the enterprise applications of blockchain, crypto became an industry by itself. Lots of end user use cases emerged, particularly with DeFi Summer, and so the more I progressed in this industry, the more I moved from the B2B side of it into the B2C side of it.
So during your tenure at Consensys, you were there for almost all of 2017 through the majority of 2021. How did, beyond just the B2B, your personal transition from B2B to B2C, how did kind of the change in the public view of crypto and blockchain impact the work that you did? Because when you first started at Consensys, it was the ICO boom. Tokens were very speculative. And then by the time you left, there was real world utility. There was DeFi applications. Celebrities were making NFT avatars on their social media accounts. So you kind of got to ride the wave at one of the leading crypto entities from speculation to early days of use. So how did you keep up with that while that was happening at Consensys? And were you noticing the change in the types of conversations you were having with these kind of like enterprise financial institutions? Were they grasping what was happening?
Not fully. I think that at Consensys, and personally, I was not really involved in the ICO boom. But in 2017, 2018, Consensys was more focused on evangelizing Ethereum and making it credible to the broader economy. And so that was really the focus of my job. But at the time, I think that we thought the only way to make money from blockchain was to sell it to corporates and explore real world use cases. So I think what really massively changed in 2021 was that crypto emerged as with an economy of its own, with very profitable companies that were serving financial services to global audiences of millions of people with extremely small teams, like Uniswap and Aave initially were probably designed by 10 people or so. So the extreme scalability of those businesses and made them profitable, even though the transaction fees that they were extracting from users were very, very small. And so the emergence of Web3 as a real economy was really the major shift. And nowadays, most crypto companies, there are lots of companies building developer tools, end user tools, wallets, etc., which are entirely sustainable thanks to the B2C economy. I think that probably we've gone a little too far in that direction, in the sense that the regulatory regime in the US has prevented many bridges from being built between the Web3 sphere and the banking sector and the real economy. The regulatory regime has also scared off many corporates from continuing to invest in Web3 projects, particularly in areas that were gray from a regulatory standpoint. I think NFTs are easy because it's just collectibles, but as soon as you start getting into payments and DeFi, that's much more of a gray area. So anyway, I think we've gone a little too far in the emergence of Web3 as a standalone and isolated economy, as isolated sphere. And hopefully, with the evolution of the regulatory regime in the US and elsewhere, we can move a little bit back into a situation where the Web3 economy exists and stands on its own 2 feet, but also has more bridges with the real world economy.
So you mentioned the U.S. regulatory regime, and I've been in crypto since 2017. I've been working full-time in the space since 2018. I can feel the clampdown that has increased over the past few years, but you also have experience yourself in speaking with regulatory agencies in the EU. So you spent a little bit of time as a management committee member at the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum, and you also spent a small amount of time helping to educate the EU's Digital Finance Task Force on MiCA. So maybe you could share a little bit about your interactions with regulators and regulatory bodies in the EU, and do you think that those open conversations that were being had in 2018, 2019, 2020, do you think that we're starting to see the fruit from that tree kind of bear now? Whereas in the US, we're definitely seeing the lack of communication during that time frame kind of play out right now?
So definitely, when you want to make a technology usable by the world, there's a lot of work that goes into evangelizing it, meaning educating the society and its various stakeholders about how it works and what it does. I think we've gone a long way. In the early days, the number one concern was like, what happens if quantum computers crack Bitcoin? What happens if my block is mined by North Korea, and it means that suddenly I'm in business, with North Korea just by using the blockchain? So I think what was hard at the time was that people were seeing all kinds of risks and had trouble quantifying their relative importance. Right? There are, of course, risks associated with crypto, but it's important to weigh them according to their likelihood and actual impact. So anyway, a lot of education was needed, and this work is not over for sure. We are seeing also in AI, right, the massive, the massive amounts of money that OpenAI and other AI technology companies are investing in government lobbying, public affairs, etc. But I think that that kind of separate from the political will. I think you can do you can educate technocrats and the bureaucracy, and that's an ongoing effort. But then in the end, democracies are such that some people have different opinions about what is good for society, and that changes with election cycles. But I think the issue in the US is not that regulators are not informed about blockchain anymore. I think they're pretty smart and pretty educated. But politically, they've just decided that it's not something that they want to support. And that's entirely any political view is legitimate. People can have their own opinions. It's just in the end, hopefully, it's something that changes when the governments rotate as part of the natural democracy cycles.
So we're recording this on July 23rd. So by the time this airs at the end of September, I can almost guarantee that there will have been a lot of turmoil in the American political sphere, as is the case with election cycles that just seem to be more divisive and more crazy every 4 years as they continue to move forward. So with that caveat, to whoever's listening to this right now, there might be some changes to insights that we may or may not have right now. But before Biden kind of dropped out of the race, he was viewed as the Democratic Party was viewed as like the anti-crypto party. And Trump has mentioned a lot of pro and favorable crypto support in his run up to this election. So far, what are kind of the things the world should be excited about and maybe a little bit on edge or worried about when it comes to maybe crypto policy and outlook that will shake out of the US? And do you think that maybe we have a reason for hope for a better future for crypto here in the US?
Yeah, definitely. And it's very hard to predict what will happen. Even if the Republicans win the presidential election, they will have bigger fish to fry than just focusing on crypto for the first 100 days. So, and many things will happen. So, I'm hoping that like I said before, I think first of all, the bureaucracy is fairly well educated now around the world. In the US, in Singapore, in Europe. So that makes it much easier to restart the dialogue if there is a political will to do so. We won't have to start from scratch, which would otherwise have taken a few years. So I see that as a very positive signal for crypto. I think at the same time, I think it's also our responsibility as industry members to behave properly, so to engage in dialogue and also to make sure that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. Right? The Terra and FTX crises were not caused by public policy. Maybe they were indirectly influenced by it, because there was a lack of engagement, which made it easier for large offshore actors to grow very big. But in the end, it's we brought this upon ourselves, and the worst that could happen is if the market heats up again and we bring another similar crisis upon ourselves. So I think it's up to the sector to really make sure that we're vigilant, that we're alerting users if we're seeing protocols that are taking undue risks, and hopefully that we're self-regulating in some way. I think that's really what's important, and the biggest risk would be that we the biggest risk could come from within.
Do you think that the kind of like thought leaders and I guess KOLs and whatever you want to call them in the space are ready to step up to the challenge of maybe saying the next SBF, if he comes around, maybe calling him out? Because a lot of people are afraid to kind of lose their clout and might be afraid to have negative blowback on their projects. So in a space such as crypto, when things are going up, people are really, it's really easy to turn the other cheek and to look the other way. Do you think that we've internalized these issues with charlatans and bad projects in the past to the point where if we do see another SBF or another Terra, that folks really will kind of sound the alarm? Or I'm a little cynical because I think, if people are making a bunch of money, they'll just not say anything. Do you think we've learned that lesson?
For sure. The industry as a whole has learned that lesson, and people will be able to relate to past experiences if there are alerts to be given. Of course, we cannot deny that from the standpoint of end users, there is this very strong urge to make money quickly by investing in tokens and seeing those tokens increase in value by 100 or 1,000 factor. And that urge is very hard to overcome. The best thing that we can do as an industry, again, is to work towards the adoption of Web3 and decentralized applications for their real use. Right? Most tokens ultimately are meant to power decentralized protocols, to serve as governance, as a representation of voting rights in the governance, as a way to redistribute the value created by those protocols. And so what we can hope is that a growing number of people adopt Web3 and the underlying tokens as tools to use the decentralized financial infrastructure that we're creating, as opposed as purely speculative tokens. I think arguably we're slowly getting in that direction. There were, when I started, there were probably 10,000 people in the world using decentralized applications. Now tens of millions, and even though that number has gone down significantly since 2021, I expect that we're on the right track and we're building the right tools for that.
So I think the thing that maybe attracted a lot of people in 2024 to testing out these Web3 ecosystems might have been a lot of airdrops that happened this year. Of course, meme coins were a craze that was onboarding a lot of folks. We also saw the kind of meme coin craze prop up a third chain in Solana as kind of like the landing point for the new entrant into Web3. So beyond kind of free money from airdrops and crazy gains from meme coins, these are very short-term sort of incentive structures to onboard folks. And maybe they're not necessarily onboarding somebody who's really here for the right cause. I've mentioned on this pod a lot of times, my genesis into open source software was downloading the first album that my parents wouldn't want me to listen to off of Napster. And that moment of empowerment that really made me appreciate open source software, torrents, and kind of put me down this path of embracing peer-to-peer networks and technologies. Do you think that we're building a space with the right ideology today that can capture these folks who can fall in love with peer-to-peer networks such as myself? And is that kind of going to start shining through after we get over the honeymoon period of free airdrops and meme coin ridiculous price action?
Yeah, I do. So when I listen to Cronos users, I hear time and again motivations that are similar to the ones that brought me to Web3 in the first place. Basically, every interaction with a bank is so disappointing that people hope that there's a better way to do things. Every time you call your bank, they're trying to cross-sell you something else, and it's just like hundreds of pages of paperwork. They are construed as providing financial advice, even though most people don't really understand or read the checks that are provided to them. So I think the motivations, the prime motivations are still valid. And when I talk to children of my, like teenager or young adults who are children of my friends, they've gone fully digital. For them, crypto is not just about getting rich quick. It's just about financial rates that match their nomadic and digital lifestyle. So I think the core motivations are valid and are generationally relevant. At the same time, in any industry, you need to subsidize adoption. So, OpenAI is, we're paying much less for ChatGPT than what ChatGPT costs. OpenAI is subsidizing the use of ChatGPT in a massive way. When Uber and Deliveroo started, we had free rides, free delivery. Now, for when it comes to credit cards, you get 5% cash back for the first 3 months at any large financial institution in the US. So, there's always a certain amount of free money that is necessary to change user behaviors. I don't see it necessarily as a sign that the entire foundation is rotten.
Mm-hmm. So I think anybody who's been in crypto for a cycle or maybe even for just a couple of years, you can see the launch of a chain come and go very quickly. You can see the launch of a project come and go very quickly. And so to have tenure in this space is a feat in and of itself. And I feel like today, if we zoom out of the Cronos and the CRO ecosystem, maybe you don't hear all these key opinion leaders online or these influencers talking about it every day. But Cronos has hundreds of dApps, has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users. There is continuously being new thought poured into the ecosystem. There's testing of new technology that's coming out of the non-custodial chains. So I'm curious, what are some of the key characteristics that have made Cronos able to survive the ebbs and flows of attention in the blockchain space? And how has this ecosystem continued to build and survive, regardless of it being like the number one search term or not being searched at all? What are some of the things that keep this community and this ecosystem resilient?
Cronos is a blockchain ecosystem. And by that, we mean that it consists of a few things. First of all, Cronos is an open source project that launches blockchain networks. So right now, there are 3 blockchain networks, each with its own positioning and purposes. Cronos is also an ecosystem of third-party developers who create and deploy apps on those networks. And finally, there's a user community which calls itself CRO Farm, and consists of tens or more than tens of millions of users around the world. So Cronos was built in partnership with the engineering teams at Crypto.com, initially really as a way to make it easier for new users into Web3 to start experimenting with self-custodial applications. At the time, the thesis was that there were networks like Ethereum, like others, who had been built and very successful with whales or with degen traders, sophisticated users. And there was room to create a place where newer users into Web3 could experiment with self-custodial applications. So still enjoy the benefits of controlling their keys, but not have to go through the hoops of understanding more sophisticated products like the ones that we have on Ethereum. I think this thesis still holds, and in a way, Cronos exists now a little bit like a country, right? There are companies and people in France, in Germany, in the US. Each chain exists more or less as a supranational digital community of people who have their own idiosyncrasies, way of thinking, reference points. And I don't see necessarily. there are chains that are bigger than others, and fortunately, Cronos has always been ranked, more or less in the top 15 of all chains, which is great. But I don't see necessarily a competition between chains as a war where only one can survive. Rather, I see each chain as having its own positioning and relevance based on its own community. And certainly, the Cronos community has been very strong and has encouraged the grassroots developers to develop their own applications. So DeFi is strong on Cronos as a use case, has always been, and certainly has generated a certain level of base activity that has maintained the chain in its top 15 position throughout the years. But more recently, games and meme coins, have really generated a lot of passions in the community because those are people who are active on Twitter, are active on Discord, and like the idea of sort of controlling or influencing projects that are originating from the grassroots community. And so those newer use cases have, on Cronos, like on other chains, propelled the activity by a factor of 5 or 10. And we aim to continue doing that. We aim to have a base level of activity that is around DeFi and recurring use cases. But also we want to encourage developers to be agile and capture the new and hottest trends so that end users don't feel like feel that they're finding on Cronos as much innovation as what they're finding on other chains.
I don't know if you can quantify this. Maybe it's more of just a feeling or a vibe. But you mentioned that there's a resurgence in chain activity because of meme coins and Web3 gaming. Are you, from your insights and just perspective, are you feeling that these are new users that are onboarding into Web3? Or maybe these are folks from past cycles who are being reignited and re-engaged into Web3, and it's just games and fun meme coin trading that's kind of bringing them back? So is this new users, or is this kind of the same people that were here, just reinvigoration in their on-chain activity?
On Cronos, as on other blockchains, currently it's more of the latter. It's more existing users re-engaging with the use cases and overcoming the frustrations and disappointment that they had experienced in 2022. Which is both like a bad piece of news and a good one, right? So on one side, it means that we haven't yet managed to bring back lots of new users into the industry, and kind of right now for many traders it feels a little bit like a zero-sum game. But I think the flip side of that, and the good news, is that if we continue on that direction and make those existing users advocates of crypto again, proponents, evangelizers, then the potential upside of starting again this pipeline of new users can be tremendous. And so we're certainly gearing up for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what really excited me in 2021 and 2022 came out of the Cosmos ecosystem, and that was that a lot of people were taking their Luna and their UST off of exchanges, and they were learning how to become on-chain members of Web3. Unfortunately, they were staking their UST in Anchor to get that 20% yield, and they got burnt. So we lost potentially a huge wave of new Web3 users. So I kind of appreciate your perspective that it's both good and bad, that we're quote unquote only bringing back the folks that were here in 21 and 22. But to be able to win them back over and bring them back on chain, that's a huge win, because that could have been a whole class of users that we lost forever. So it's a little refreshing, despite the fact that it's not necessarily new folks. But that also kind of brings a point that I'm curious about. And I don't think we can hammer home enough that Cronos is a separate entity from crypto.com, that the non-custodial blockchain ecosystem does not necessarily run lockstep with the custodial exchange. But I am curious from your perspective, and since you are on the non-custodial side of this calculus, in 2024, does a centralized exchange need to have its own blockchain and blockchain ecosystem to be a relevant entity? We see this with Coinbase launching Base last year, and this year arguably becoming one of the more popular L2s. We saw this with Binance when they launched their chain years ago. We see this with OKX. They have their own chain. I'm sure just countless other custodial exchanges. So from your perspective, does a custodial exchange need to have a decentralized, non-custodial ecosystem that is its counterpart?
Centralized exchanges need to become the gold standard in terms of like regulatory clarity, safety, customer service. And so I think it's very important for custodial exchanges to operate well within the limits of regulation. And certainly our partner, Crypto.com, has done that, seeking regulatory approvals in probably more countries around the world than any other exchange. And so, as you mentioned, right, the custodial exchanges exist separately from decentralized apps and decentralized protocols. In a way, the regulatory framework or the conceptual framework that the industry has tried to push for many years was, it's okay to regulate entry points, so on ramps and off ramps, right? So it's okay to regulate bridges between crypto and the banking ecosystem, and clearly custodial exchanges are the prime way where this should happen. And hopefully, if we do that, then we don't need to regulate pieces of open source software like this, or tools, given that we consider decentralized applications more like tools than financial products. So my point was, I think it's essential, first of all, that custodial exchanges remain well within the limits of regulation and don't entertain blurriness or lack of clarity about what exactly they are. But at the same time, of course, the reason why centralized exchanges exist at all is because they are tokens. And the reason why tokens exist is because they power decentralized protocols. So I think it's important also to recognize that this whole economy exists because decentralized protocols exist, and therefore custodial exchanges should make as many partnerships as possible, should have an open architecture, should help their users to understand what's beneath that, that it's not just a bunch of tokens which prices goes up and down. So from that standpoint, we're very grateful that Crypto.com is participating in the Cronos ecosystem. They dedicate engineering and security resources to participate in the open source protocol. They have a very good sense of what end users want, what security threats are on the horizon, and they are bringing a lot of value to building a vibrant ecosystem.
Do you see, where do your flow of users come from? Do you see them kind of becoming on-chain curious from Crypto.com, or are you capturing users from just native on-chain crypto users?
Right now, the majority of Cronos users are coming from Crypto.com, in the sense that they were mainstream users who got who gained awareness of crypto thanks to those massive Crypto.com marketing campaigns. And then they started researching more what this is about, and they started becoming more familiar with decentralized applications. And many of them then started using Cronos because Cronos is so easy to use from within the Crypto.com products. There are also lots of Cronos users who are coming from Cosmos because the Cronos EVM chain is EVM compatible blockchain based on the Cosmos SDK, which is a technical way of saying that it interoperates with Cosmos chains, but offers the flexibility and open ecosystem of Ethereum-like blockchains. So many of our users are Cosmos users who have Cosmos crypto holdings and are trying to trade them or lend them, take advantage of the kind of innovations that Ethereum has brought to the picture. And now, we're by the time this episode is broadcast, we will have launched Cronos ZK-EVM, which is a layer 2 blockchain on top of Ethereum that complements our ecosystem. And we're really hoping that this new chain, because it's anchored to Ethereum and has a secure bridge to Ethereum, this chain can really be a beacon to bring new users beyond our existing kind of audiences of Crypto.com and Cosmos users.
So that's something that I think is super cool about the Cronos ecosystem, is that there is this tri-chain kind of structure. So I want to delve into this a little bit more. But before we kind of talk about each of the chains, I guess let's start at the genesis. Cronos POS, it's built on the Cosmos SDK. Why did the team opt to build on top of Cosmos? Did Cronos launch during the 2020, 2021 era where the Cosmos SDK was kind of like the hot new thing? And you were hoping to kind of capture these new wave of users who were more into the modular chain thesis? Or did the Cosmos SDK offer something inherently better than that which was available in like EVM land?
Yes. So at the time when the Cronos POS chain was created, I think there was, first of all, Cosmos was emerging as a battle-tested consensus engine, right, for lack of a better word. Right? There was a thesis at the time that was gaining ground, which was the idea of sovereign chains, the idea that not everything has to happen on Ethereum. And to some extent, with L2s, that thesis of sovereign chains, is regaining momentum. There is again this idea that it's not a single chain where everything can happen. So the thesis of the sovereign chain was gaining ground. Cosmos was a very battle-tested and proven technology to create such sovereign chains, and I think that has been proven over time. Right, all the Cosmos chains have shown tremendous resilience and robustness. And at the same time, I think I think a lot of the at the time, I think a lot of the Western world was kind of like Bitcoin or Ethereum, and that's it. But elsewhere in the world, in Asia in particular, and to some extent in Europe with Polkadot, there was really this desire to see alternative ecosystems emerge. And so, I think when you have a global user base and you're looking at all the trends around the world, it was hard to miss that there was this emerging new technology that was bringing something new to the picture. So I think Cosmos is great and has been great for us. Has demonstrated its reliability, and even today. So after Cronos POS, so we launched Cronos EVM chain, which was also a chain based on Cosmos, but with an additional layer that is EVM compatible. And so with Cronos EVM today, we can see that some of the reasons why we chose Cosmos, like interoperability, so things that are in technical terms called interchain security, interchain account. Now there are modules for parallel execution. So there are lots of optimizations that are very advanced from an engineering standpoint that the community in Cosmos is bringing to the picture, and we those innovations are really tremendous. They represent the best of what's happening in other ecosystems. So that's great. The two main pain points and limitations of Cosmos were so first of all, so Cronos POS was not programmable. Developers could not build their own applications. So Cronos EVM solved that. And then the other limitation was that, of course, the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole, with its layer 2s, has emerged as also a very important and self-contained ecosystem. And for us, it was hard to stay isolated from that. We felt that the developers and the users of Cronos deserved a direct link to that big and growing ecosystem around Ethereum, which was the motivation for creating Cronos zkEVM.
I kind of want to take a sidestep and maybe get a little philosophical, because if you look at the advent of these L2s in EVM land, they've really just been gaining in popularity. And we've seen a lot of excitement, maybe some dulled excitement with some of the airdrops this year, but we've seen a lot of growth in the L2s. And if you look into the Cosmos ecosystem, it was touted in 2021 and 2022 as like the app chain was the next big thing. And a lot of people got really excited about this, and they got super kind of engaged within the Cosmos ecosystem. And maybe it was a honeymoon period where they had just hearts in their eyes, and they thought that Cosmos was going to be the next thing and it was going to beat Ethereum. But if you look today, and we can use the price of Atom as a proxy, even though price doesn't determine development, the price of Atom is as low today as it was in 2019. If you go on Reddit to the Cosmos subreddit, you see a lot of maybe frustration with folks. And I don't think this is unique to just Cosmos. I'm really not trying to bash on Cosmos. I love it. But right now, sentiment for just the ecosystem as a whole is kind of low. And we're starting to see sentiment for all these L2s in Ethereum kind of rise. So I'm curious if you're noticing the same thing. If you are, does this impact kind of your decisions to invest time and energy into maintaining Cronos EVM? If not, if you're seeing a lot more excitement and eagerness and engagement in L2 land, does this dictate that you put more time and resources into the ZK-EVM? How does this kind of perception of Cosmos versus Ethereum's L2s, how do you view this, and does it impact your decisions on which chain of the three that Cosmos has, or that Cronos has, to kind of focus time and energy into?
So I will answer the second question first, and then the first one. So for us at the moment, the relative positioning of each chain is very clear. Cronos POS is what we call the layer 0, meaning it's really where we host the governance of the ecosystem, and particularly the governance of CRO, which is the utility token of the ecosystem. CRO is entirely controlled by the decentralized governance of Cronos chain, which is guaranteeing its security, which is guaranteeing the total money supply and the emissions rates. Cronos EVM is the EVM compatible chain built on Cosmos SDK. It benefits from many years of operating flawlessly, and thanks to the innovations happening in Cosmos, it's going to continue to become more scalable and cheaper. At the moment, it has the potential of being cheaper and more scalable than many layer 2s, which are still an evolving and maturing technology. So we see Cronos EVM as continuing to be the go-to point for mainstream users, for NFTs, for gaming, because it has been optimized for that. And for those use cases, there is not a huge need for cross-chain liquidity. Finally, we see Cronos ZK-EVM as the chain for more advanced use cases, in particular in DeFi. We also see it as the chain for institutional adoption because as a layer 2, it is secured by Ethereum and has a secured native bridge with Ethereum. And so we hope to be building on Cronos zkEVM an ecosystem of institutional applications, corporate applications, advanced DeFi applications, and reward asset use cases that take fully advantage of Ethereum. So I think each chain has its own use, and we will continue to invest in all three of them. Now, there are all kinds of great things about Cosmos that we discussed, and so I'm going to answer your first question. At the same time, I think what has happened with Cosmos. So first of all, so Cosmos is still a vibrant ecosystem now, thanks in particular to other chains. I think DYDX, Osmosis, and Celestia are probably more like the flag bearers of the Cosmos ecosystem now than Cosmos Hub. But nevertheless, I think what we've learned from the evolution of the Cosmos ecosystem is that app chains are really a hard proposition for end users. It's hard for them to. So if you're any end user, it's hard to keep a blockchain top of mind if you're only going there, once a month for a particular use case. And so as a chain ecosystem, you have to really. It's important not to be naive and think that you can build the following just with one use case. You need, of course, to have. You can't be fully generalist, and you have to have your own differentiation and idiosyncrasies. But at the same time, you need to have a critical mass of applications on a single chain that makes it possible for users to come every day and keep the chain front of mind, top of mind. And I think that has been one of the challenges for many Cosmos chains, which is they didn't have enough to do on each of them to get users to come every day. And I think that's why, if you look at DYDX, of course, they are trying to build an ecosystem around the core DYDX protocol. If you look at Celestia, they are going to exist not as a B2C chain, but as an infrastructure to support data availability for many other blockchains. So I think that there's a way for Cosmos chains to exist and to have a real value in the ecosystem. But it can't be as pure B2C infrastructures to do to host a single application.
I appreciate your perspective on maybe where the Cosmos and the app chain thesis might have gone wrong. But that's not a negative, or it's not necessarily like a nail in the coffin for just Cosmos chains in general, that there needs to be maybe some extra thought that's put into what brings users back. And maybe that's not necessarily, unique to Cosmos itself. I think that any alt chain that launches really needs to have a use case and drive users there and continue to iterate and improve upon itself and bring people back to the chain, which is really cool. What we were talking about with meme coins and DeFi and Web3 gaming for the Cronos ecosystem. So I do want to talk a little bit about ZK-EVM because I believe if I listened to some of your previous talks earlier, Cronos is the first chain that's building on top of the ZK Sync stack. So you shared a little bit of the lessons that you learned in your talk at ETHCC. So maybe we can build upon the presentation that you made and kind of just like assume that people listen to that. So why did the team choose to build on its third chain on top of the ZK Sync stack, as opposed to maybe like the OP stack or something else that had a little bit more tenure?
So the goal for Cronos zkEVM is to be a chain that is fully connected to Ethereum, which enables, we think, institutional adoption, corporate adoption, like more sophisticated DeFi adoption. But also the goal of Cronos zkEVM is to serve as experimental playground where we can make sure that we are using leading edge technology and future-proof when it comes to scalability and other benefits of L2s. So from that standpoint, Cronos zkEVM, which is built on the ZK Sync technology, was to us kind of a great compromise, a great trade-off between the various things that we're trying to accomplish. So first of all, it is a future-proof technology. Nowadays, and hopefully it stays that way, zero knowledge scalability is recognized as really the end game future for Ethereum. Even the other scalability solutions recognize that at some point it's some use of zero knowledge technology for scalability is necessary, and certainly Vitalik has also kind of endorsed that as the end game for Ethereum. So it's a future-proof technology. At the same time, the ZK Sync team has a tremendous track record in running ZK Sync era and generating a lot of activity and an ecosystem around that. So it's not it's a great track record and proof of concept. And finally, as Cronos team, we were really looking for an ecosystem where we could not just take the technology but also contribute back to it. It has been what the team has done on Cosmos, contributing back to Cosmos as an open source project. And so we felt that this particular project with ZK Sync was one where there was an openness to having third-party teams contribute to it, as opposed to the kind of the original team controlling the technology fully. So those were the motivations from a technical standpoint that led us to choose ZK Sync era as the template. I'm sure that there are other L2 technologies that are going to flourish over time, but this was the right choice for us at the moment. But so what's really? Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was gonna just kind of double down on the playground concept that you're speaking about, using ZK-EVM to be this playground for cutting edge technology. And one of the things that kind of popped out when I was looking into Cronos ZK-EVM is that the team intends for there to be gasless fee trading. So maybe what are some of the unique features that your team has unlocked by building the Cronos ZK-EVM chain? And maybe you can share some of the selling points for what this third chain will bring.
Yes, as you mentioned, we expect Cronos ZK-EVM to be the first ZK chain, so to go live in mainnet. And when it does, and it will have done by the time this podcast is broadcast, the value proposition will revolve around the following strengths. First of all, we want to make liquid staked tokens as the default cryptocurrencies, as first citizens on the chain. In the context of high interest rates, and even though they may come down a little bit this year, I think the interest rate paradigm has changed to last overall around the world. So in the context of high interest rates, crypto offers this incredible ability of having programmable money that auto compounds just by holding it when it's invested into staking or other DeFi protocols. So, of course, in order to have that on a blockchain, you need to kind of build it from scratch so that the whole ecosystem is designed in such a way that it is not USDC or ETH or BTC or CRO that are the default cryptocurrencies, but rather the yield-bearing versions of that. So Blast has done that successfully, but so far it's the only chain to have managed to accomplish such a feat. And so for us, we want to provide an alternative to Blast as being one of the only chains where you can earn yield as a user just by holding ETH, USD, or CRO. So that's the first differentiating point. The second one is really we want to integrate the concept of airdrop with everyday usage of the chain. Right, so up until now, the idea was that when you launch a chain, you organize some quests, people get points, and at some point those points are converted into an airdrop, and then the story is over. We're trying to introduce a new way of thinking about it, where it's more like a continuous reward system. So on Cronos ZK-EVM, there will be successive seasons of quests. So as a user, you constantly have opportunities to get more points. And then those points are converted into additional yield that you can claim from the chain by continuing to use it. So let's say if you have 100 points, those points mean that you have access to like $1,000 of rewards. The way that you get those rewards is not as a single airdrop, but rather as additional yield that you will get on the crypto that you're holding on the chain. So hopefully this will create a virtuous circle where the people benefiting from the airdrops are the people using the chain. In contrast with, I think, the feeling that I've got in recent months where I've really felt as a user excluded from those airdrops. Like if I don't have the time to strategize and if I on many new chains, what I do is I just yield farm. I put some liquidity because usually the rates are attractive. But by doing that, I'm usually not optimizing the amount of points that I'm getting, and I'm feeling left out compared with professional airdrops hunters. So I think we're trying to bring back the balance in favor of end users. And number three, as you mentioned, so like zkSync era, Cronos ZK-EVM will offer gasless transactions, which means that dApps can either subsidize the gas or you can pay the gas in any cryptocurrency. So it's much simpler to use than if you always have to hold the chain's gas currency in order to make any transaction.
I think that, so if you look at a lot of the folks on crypto Twitter who did get these airdrops, there was a lot of dissatisfaction that came with the airdrops as well. So I think beyond the point that you just brought up, that not only can we not compete with professional airdrop farmers because we have lives to live, and we're Web3 natives, and if it's too difficult for us, forget it for your traditional, just like custodial exchange user. So the fact that Cronos is looking at this triple yield bearing opportunity and bringing in a point system to kind of benefit the user of the chain, and therefore maybe even just benefit the average user who sends a little bit of yield there and maybe gives them a reason to come back and be an on-chain user. I think this is going to be a fascinating case study to follow, and possibly something that other ecosystems mirror once they see how you guys are building on top of lessons learned from other ecosystems like Blast. So this is just going to be a fun case study to follow as time goes on. I am curious to hear the relationship between the CRO token and how it will exist on zero knowledge EVM. will the CRO token kind of be one-to-one with zkCRO, or how will it differentiate itself from the existing token supply?
zkCRO is a liquid staked version of CRO, meaning that when you hold zkCRO, what you hold is a proof that there is CRO staked on the Cronos POS chain that is used to secure the governance of the Cronos POS chain. So in normal times, what would happen is that as your CRO is generating rewards from the staking, the price of zkCRO should increase relative to the price of CRO to reflect that incremental value accumulated. However, of course, if there is a slashing event on Cronos POS, then the price of zkCRO would fall accordingly. But that's something that nowadays is commonly accepted in the way that liquid staked tokens are designed.
Very cool. And by the time people listen to this, ZK-EVM will have launched. And I always feel bad asking this question because you and your team just worked your asses off to deliver a product, but crypto is always what's next. So wrapping up, final question. Assuming that by the time the listener listens to this at the end of September, ZK-EVM is now live. What's next? What's on the roadmap for the Cronos team? Are you going to double down on building out the Cronos ZK-EVM? Are there other kind of roadmap ticket items that you have on top of mind?
Yes. So first of all, we're really convinced that the Cronos dApp ecosystem has more to offer, has untapped potential, if you will. On Cronos EVM, which is a relatively isolated L1, where you mostly on-ramp through crypto.com, but it's isolated from Ethereum. It has already generated a lot of excitement and activity, but in our view, there is untapped potential because if we make those dApps available to the broader Ethereum ecosystem, people can recognize how easy to use and financially attractive they are. So short term, what's next is really to build on the foundations that we already have and make sure that we maximize how easy and accessible they are for the broader public. And beyond that, really, I think like all of us in crypto, we are slaves to the cycles and how the broader adoption play is going to take place. So our bet, like I said before, our bet is that mainstream users are going to come back because of thanks to regulatory clarity, which in turn is going to bring institutional and corporate use cases back into the ecosystem. And our bet is because we focused on building for mainstream users rather than wait for degen traders, we'll be best positioned to take advantage of the next cycle. And so we think there's tremendous potential in that. To some extent, the way that we jumped from 0 to number 8 chain at the end of 2021 when Cronos EVM launched was proof that this bet at the time was a valid one when mainstream users are coming in. And so we're hoping to benefit similarly when the next cycle of mainstream adoption starts again.
Awesome. And so if there's anyone who's listening to this that is interested in reaching out to you or to the Cronos ecosystem to maybe become a user or to become a builder, what's the best way that they can contact you or the team?
Yeah, we're on Twitter. So Cronos is at Cronos_chain. And I'm at Ken Timsit, which is probably a bit harder to spell. So the Cronos_chain is the safest bet.
Ken, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk about the Cronos non-custodial ecosystem. Like I said, I had a blast looking into the 3 different chains that is going to be operating under the Cronos umbrella. And I got a little bit excited on new ways that I can deploy my CRO within the ecosystem. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us on the Smart Economy podcast. It was a blast.
Thank you, Dylan. I really appreciate that you did all this research, and I'm really grateful.
Well, what did you think of that conversation? I thought it was fascinating to hear more about Ken's insights and perspective into the sovereign app chain thesis that Cosmos propagated, and some of the successes and failures that the chains from the Cosmos ecosystem have seen in the years since their launch. It was also really cool to learn more about how the Cronos team provided feedback to the ZK Sync team as they built out their Cronos ZK-EVM chain. It's always nice to hear how these teams can interact with one another and help each other improve on their tech stacks. And lastly, it was fascinating to learn more about some of the goals for the Cronos ZK-EVM chain, such as gasless trading fees and the triple yield bearing token. To keep up to date with the Smart Economy podcast, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And if you like the guests that we've had on the show, please consider showing your support by commenting, liking, reviewing, rating, and sharing this episode with friends and family. Once again, all of those actions really do help get these episodes in front of more ears and eyes. And of course, if you're a NEO token holder, please consider voting for NEO News Today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. With all that said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Smart Economy podcast, and we're looking forward to catching you on the next episode.